I will certainly be reading every single comment. So make sure you get typing if you have any questions for our guest today, Rohan Jayaweera. He's from the technology field. He has an entrepreneurship background. So if you have questions related to those as well, we'd be happy to hear from you. All right, we have some more books here. Art of War, The Element. All right. And as the clock strikes 7:30, ladies and gentlemen, we are now officially ready to begin our discussion here this evening. For all of us who just joined in, once again, welcome to Why I Read, an online conversation that is brought to you by Pick a Book. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, allow me to officially introduce you to this concept that we call Pick a Book. Pick a Book is an incredible initiative that was launched with the aim of igniting the love and the passion for reading. And as the name suggests, it's a club where readers can select a book, they read and research thoroughly and present the book as a summary before an audience. Pick a Book not only inculcates the habit of reading, but it also helps to impart a wealth of knowledge while honing our readers' communication skills. Our discussion today, which is called Why I Read, is a Pick a Book initiative, and it engages successful individuals, influential personalities in a conversation, asking them to share with us how reading has helped them achieve greatness, both personally as well as professionally. And we trust that everything that's shared today in this segment of Why I Read will add great value to you as well. Now, once again, let me remind you, for those of you who have questions for our guests, you're welcome to use the Q&A feature on this platform. Submit your question, and we will be delighted to present your question to our guest. All right, with that, let me now officially begin by introducing our fascinating guest to you this evening, Rohan Jayaweera, who is a man of many facets. Yes, hello, welcome to the call. Before I ask you to tell us a little bit about yourselves, let me also inform everybody joining in that Rohan is an entrepreneur. He's a leader in the field of technology in Sri Lanka. And for those of you who already read his profile, he serves professionally as an analytics delivery lead for Octave, the John Keells Group. He's assistant vice president at John Keells Holdings PLC. He's also co-founder director at Antira Solutions Private Limited. And many of you might also know him as the first representative for Google in Sri Lanka. Now, in my prior conversation with him, I have found Rohan to be somebody who's curious, who is not afraid to think out of the box, and he's also nurturing some very interesting worldviews. So with that, I'd like to officially say hi to Rohan. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Shrishma. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's always nice. And obviously, this is something really passionate for me. I'm very passionate about. My family is very passionate about. So I'm so blessed to be part of this. Thank you.
So at the very outset, Rohan, I know that I've only mentioned a few of your credentials professionally, but you are so much more than that. So can you tell us about yourself in your own words?
I think similar to what we discussed during our conversation, I think I told you, like, none of that's actually really matter, right? The way that I would like to identify myself, and I think it's in my Instagram profile as well, like I'm a husband, a tata, and a greater fool, in that particular order. Especially for this audience, I think that's the way I would like to park it. The rest of it are just career stuff that happens to, kind of take shape and take form as we go along. Greater fool is someone who believes that he can make a difference where everyone else has failed. So for me, that's one of those things that I've always been trying to achieve and trying to do with my journey of entrepreneurship, or with all the other stuff that I try to do. So I mean, for me, Rohan is just simple. That's good enough.
Fantastic. But I like this title of Greater Fool, because as Steve Jobs had said, stay hungry, stay foolish. So I'm sure all of us joining in the call are hungry to hear more about your journey as a reader, which then in turn led you to be a leader. So let's start off right at the very beginning. What influenced you to pick up your first book? Tell us what books have meant to you from that time on.
I think let me just provide a context and dot the lines. I think it's always easier looking back and connecting the dots. Looking back, right? So I grew up in a particular environment. Obviously, my era was pre-internet, right? And pre-internet, pre-Facebook, pre-LinkedIn, pre-Instagram, TikTok, and also Tinder, right? I mean, everything was pre. So the only thing we actually had was something, and I think I remember, I don't know, the first couple of books I started really being fascinated towards I think would have been, I don't know whether you heard about a Sri Lankan Sinhalese author called Kulasena Fonseca. So Kulasena Fonseca wrote these 3 adult teenage adventure stories, one called Tumyahalu Vikramaya, Kallanduve Mutukolle, and then there was another one called, if I'm not mistaken, Somapura Vikramaya or something like that. So I read those 3 books and I got really fascinated. Then I evolved and I got into a college and I started seeing that kids were reading a particular type of books. And I think the book that I've started kind of obviously getting fascinated towards and started reading were things like the famous 5, the Enid Blyton era, right? I mean, we all had that, I think, famous 5 and Secret 7 and few other stuff. And that was the type. And I think I must tell you this also, one of the facts is that my English wasn't good at all during that time. So simple reading a book which other kids would have done in about a couple of months, I would have taken like a lot more time, because just to be able to understand the language as well. But I kind of, for some reason, my peer group started reading. I also wanted to be able to talk to them about those ideas and stuff like that. Then of course you ended up becoming the early teenage years, you start getting into Hardy Boys, and there was always that the Tintin and the Asterix started happening. I know Tintin should have happened earlier, but for us it was during the same time as Hardy Boys. And then there was a slightly more mature thing with the investigators. Again, I think I remember Hardy Boys, we had this little internal competition in the class, who reads all the books. Like at that time there were like about 80 or 90 books, and I think you are killing and dying to find that 1 or 2 books that is nobody has, to find out, get a hold of it and read it and to say, okay, I've checked and I've read the entire series. Started like that. And I think what is really interesting is that we didn't really have entertainment as much. We had probably a 1 TV at home, and father used to watch either cricket or news or whatever, and maybe the mother used to watch the TV dramas. So the only way that as children our fascination and imagination start to grow, and I think that's why books are such a powerful thing. It kind of nurtures your imagination a lot more. The way that we found imagination and think about the world and the way we perceive the world were completely through these stories that we read, Hardy Boys and the Tintin adventures and all that. And I think when you start growing older, I think I had a situation where I was really keen to improve my English. I really wanted to be able to speak English really well, because I think I told you, Trishma, this fact that I didn't have a formal English education other than O-level English in Sri Lanka, right? So I was really committed to improving my English. And the only place that we could really start reading and really, improving your vocabulary and all of that were simply through books, right? And there wasn't really a lot of content on YouTube or none of that were existing. So one of the things that happened was my father took me and introduced me to the National Library. So I was very blessed that, I used to take a 1.5 hour long bus ride one way, come on Sunday morning at about 8:39 to the National Library. And I started, kind of getting lost in those bookshelves there. I don't know, I've not been there for a long period of time. I'm very grateful for that era. Then I discovered authors like Clive Cussler, Tom Clancy, even Daniel Steele. Don't mind, I'm not ashamed to admit that I've read Daniel Steele, and then Harold Robbins and all these authors. One of the book series that I really loved was obviously the Clive Cussler's Dirk Pitt series. There was one movie that was made called Sahara. Matthew McConaughey acts on that, but there was one particular book I think for me was really stands out from that collection called Race the Titanic. The Race the Titanic book tells a story about a particular scenario which was due to a military thing that has gone wrong, and they need to raise the Titanic, which has now been underneath the sea for so many years, to bring it up. And then they talk about the technology and everything that they have put in through this agency called Numa in the book, to raise it up. And it was such a incredible imagination, and it kind of was one of those things you discover about the immense potential, your ability to do something that is so fascinating and type of a thing. So Clive Cussler was one of the authors that I've loved. And then of course at about 20s onwards, things started to change a little bit, and I think I kind of moved away from the fiction and stuff. And I read few autobiographies, and I mentioned that one of the big books that I really loved was autobiography, which in my head I read few. One really that really stands out for me was the Andre Agassi's book, or book called Open, about his actual book. Because growing up, whatever tennis I watched, he was like this bad boy with a he had the girls, the looks, the everything, right? So he was like at 20s one of the guys that you really wanted to look up to, and reading his autobiography was really fascinating story. Today, I mean, I think, to cut a long story short, I mean, I think for me, books I read is primarily driven by my interest at the moment. If I'm to say that the last fiction book that I read was obviously Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code. But obviously, because of the hype, I was like, let me start reading that. And I read that and the Digital Fortress and Angels and Demons and the entire thing. Similarly, I started reading Twilight. I'm not ashamed to admit it. It's one of the worst books in my mind, written books. I barely got through like the first 10 pages, and I said, this book is so badly written. And I kind of stopped reading that book, The Twilight. I know I'm going to disappoint a lot of people here, but that's the truth. It's just such a rubbish book.
You've actually quite a lot of different genres you've been covering. I mean, you had fiction, you've had detective novels, but let's talk about right now.
So I apologize. I forgot to add Fall of Moondust, Arthur C. Clarke. Was one of again, a really interesting books I've read. Again, growing up, early stages, I used to be obviously Space Odyssey, all of those. I think if you look at it, it's all more or less like, whether it is what kind of a genre, it's always been about this big imagination-driven type of a thing. Fall of Moon does discuss about this particular spatial that breaks down in Moon, because we have civilized Moon at that time from that book. And I think I think that's sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
So I was going to say that, with all these books that you've read, I'm sure it's shaped your worldview in a particular way. Let's talk about the current books you're reading and how that's helped you in your profession. Yes.
Yeah, I think what is really interesting for me right now is that I read, or I consume, the word I would use right now is consume. I consume books in 3 formats, which we didn't have before. And I think because I think you mentioned that you should have a couple of books to show whatever, I brought it actually. Obviously, I think anyone who can afford it, I recommend that if you can get a Kindle, I would recommend that you do that, because the reason is this has really changed to great extent. My regret is I don't use it as much as I want to, and I'm not talking about it because I have some kind of a promotional agenda here. It's not that. It's just that a lot of challenges we have in Sri Lanka about getting great books is we don't really have access to books in stores. I mean, we don't really have, like in Singapore, there's a place called Kinokuniya. You can go there and there are thousands of titles. I have spent days inside that bookstore in Singapore. We don't actually have things like that, and we don't have the latest titles coming in for different reasons. And I think, but this will solve that problem for you, where you probably can get the latest books here. And I think for me, one of the things I try to follow is read as much as possible more recent books, unless it's a classic or something that you want to go back and refer to, especially when it comes to technology and subject matter that makes sense. So this is one. I'm reading a book called Advanced Analytics for Business, which is a technical book right now on this. Then obviously the physical book I read is one of the authors called Brett King. I don't know whether you can see it. There's a bit of a light. Augmented. He's one of those really fascinating, what they call a futurist, who talks about how banking industry can help countries and everything to grow and become. But this book is a little different. This book talks about the next evolution of technology is to be able to augment humanity and technology together much more seamlessly. And I think he talks a little bit about that. The third format I think is really interesting, where I think a lot of people grossly underestimate, is to consume books in audiobook format. For me, I have it in my phone here, headphones on when I'm driving to work or whatever, occasionally, or when I'm doing a presentation, when I'm prep. I usually listen to a book, and I listen to the book at two times the speed. it's very interesting when you start reading a book, listening to a book in 2 times or 2.5 times the speed. It reduces the time, but that's the 3 things that is going on for me right now with books at the moment.
What would be your favorite way out of all those 3 to actually consume a book?
Oh, I'm old school. I'm an old school.
Yeah,
so
you like the
I mean, for me, these are the immediate, like, these are shortcuts in way more of hacking to get to the content of the book. But there's something really romantic about carrying a book and holding a book and reading it and flipping the pages and smelling that the smell of the pages when it's a new book. Call me stupid. But
No, I think a lot of our book lovers also love that, the smell of a book, the look, the feel, the touch. What do you feel about underlining stuff, marking pages? Do you do that, or do you feel that's absolutely a no-no when it comes to handling books?
That's an interesting thing, right? I mean, I was listening to a couple of books recently, and one of the biggest challenges I also have is the fact that you read a book, it's great, content is awesome, you remember bits and pieces, but remember the concept, but a lot of examples and a lot of stuff are forgotten forever. And I think I told you this as a practice, that I usually read a book and I give it away. One of my philosophies is that after I read a book, I never hang on to the book. I usually give the book away, and I don't expect it back in return. But the situation is that for me, it's kind of a get in the way of enjoying the book. So in ways, I know that maybe I need to be putting more effort to taking a bit of a highlighting and putting something, and I actually deliberately force that onto another book I read before this. Now I like the fact that I can do it. Do I do it as much as I should? I don't. Do you think people should do it? I think it's a personal choice. I think it won't work for fiction for sure. For non-fiction, maybe it may work to have a little bit of post-it notes pasted here and there, and a little bit of this thing. But here's the thing: this solves that problem with a touch of a button. So that's a lot easier there.
All right, fantastic. I know me for one, I don't feel like I've read a book unless I have underlined it, had post-it notes, had multiple bookmarks. I don't feel I've read that book. So my books are very well used. Now, Rohan, even though you say that you have read books and given it away, I also know you have plenty of books in your house. Tell us about how you've arranged that. I know you have a very
I think I was, when Raghu called me up and said, listen, we want to do this. And honestly, I want to disclaim this, give you the disclaimer that I honestly wasn't as aware about this thing, and I heard about it, and I went through multiple of the previous recordings and the Facebook page, and I was like, this is such a cool idea. I mean, this is such a great thing, and I was like so excited to join. I told Raghu, listen, dude, I'm in. Right? I mean, if I have to force my way to do this, I mean, I will do that, because I think it's really such a great thing. So, and I took some pictures and sent it to Raghu as well about the books I had. And I personally think even Raghu didn't expect me to have that number of books. I have quite a collection, and I think me and my wife, we are huge lovers of books. And I will tell you some interesting stories that me and my wife, our first more or less entrepreneurial venture is a bookstore. We started a bookstore in Sri Lanka called the Design Store. And the idea was, my wife, we were both in Singapore at that time, and we saw this like Kinakunya type of huge collection of books. And I was like, why can't we have that in Sri Lanka? I'm sure there's an audience. Of course, we didn't understand. We started it because we love books, but we didn't understand the business. So it was obviously didn't go as planned. But answer your question, do I arrange it properly? Not really, but I'll tell you something that happens. I have a mental mark in my head of where my books are, right? And if I go to a shelf, little bit of here and there, I can find the book, because I think it's almost like subconsciously, I kind of know. I don't arrange the books, like saying the genre-wise or author-wise or year-wise or whatever. I don't do that. But I just make sure that I kind of make sure that it's protected and kept in a way that it is, very well this thing. But no, I don't think I arrange it like that. I don't think it's necessary. I think the fun is answering your question about why I read across so many genres. I think it's because the fun is reading about different things. It doesn't have to fulfill it doesn't. I think the idea is that you should never feel reading a book should be a task, right? And if you make it a task is why I think it becomes harder. But if it's something you enjoy, you know, I think discovery is so amazing, right?
It is.
So that's what. Yeah.
So while I ask you your next question, I'd like to once again remind all of our participants who've joined in that your questions are more than welcome. If you have anything you'd like to ask Rohan, whether it's about books or whether it's about technology or entrepreneurship or his life journey, you're free to type in your questions in the chat box and we'll be happy to address it to our guest here in our segment. So while we wait for those questions to come in, Rohan, maybe you'd like to tell us a little bit about the favorite books that you have. I know you have a couple of books right by your side. Take us through a few of them.
Yeah, I don't have my favorite book. As I said, one of the things I do is that I read and give. I'll tell a couple of books that have been influential. I won't go to the. I think we connected on this, and I think I thought a lot about, do I really have a book that I say like, you know, it's my favorite, right? No, I don't think I would have something called a favorite, but a couple of books that have been really influential for me had been, you know, in the recent times, have been a book called 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. I don't know whether it's a very small book. It talks about being able to solve mysteries in life so that, you know, you can actually further the humanity and stuff like that. Another book that for me very personal is that I think a lot of people know that I'm a co-founder of a digital agency called Antira Solutions, and it's entrepreneurship, right? And I think it's messy, it's difficult, it's painful, all of that. And I've been reading books about, you know, is there a parallels? Are there things that I could learn from reading from other people's stories? And there was this book by Peter. No, I forget the author. I don't want to mention the name because I don't know. But the name of the book is Hard Things About Hard Things. It's a brown color book with orange letters on the cover, and that book really stood out for me. And today I recommend that book. If I could, I will make it mandatory for all the entrepreneurs. It's a fascinating book about, you know, not only about thinking about an idea, trying to build a business around it, but a lot of people don't talk about the messy middle, right? The difficult part is not that at the beginning you're all excited, you're very interested, you're inspired to do it, but turning up at like second year, third year to run it again, it takes us so much more perseverance, so much more structure, so much more discipline to make it to that next level, right? And I think Hard Things About Hard Things gave me a lot of insights about, you know, that messy middle in a business and an era in a company, and about ultimately, you know, how he thought about managing people, managing conflicts. And it's told like a story. It's a beautiful book, quite thick as well. And I think that's probably is one. Those are like the two books that I really like. I started reading Steve Jobs' autobiography. The problem with people like Steve Jobs is that their story is so well documented, right? And there's like, if you have been, I've always been following Steve Jobs in my life from YouTube and all the other places. So when I start reading the book, it was like, kind of know, I know this is famous Stanford's, you know, speech, and we know what he did. He was a shitty father, he was a great innovator, you know, we knew a lot of things about him. So some of the books I've not been able to make it through to them. So you answer question, those two have been very influential books for me in my life at the moment. Oh, by the way, during COVID time, I read 3 books. I would say influential, but I found it to be really fun. Steal Like Artists.
Artists, yes.
Show Your Work. And because Raghu is here, I wouldn't use the word, but Subtle Art of Not Giving right? Right, and the second book is what is Everything Is It, right? So those books found to be really good reads, short, small books, but very inspiring, very interesting to look at things. Yeah.
Fantastic. We do have a few questions coming in. Somebody here wants to know, an anonymous guest would like to know.
Sorry, apologies.
Yes. Somebody here would like to know if you use any speed reading and memory techniques when you read. Do you?
Listen, I mean, I've heard about this, and I know Sanjeev very well, who does the speed reading. in Sri Lanka, right? And I initially I didn't know Sanjeev then, but I saw these commercials on TV where people are reading the book like like this, right? I was like, wow, this is like finding kryptonite. I mean, this is like the best thing that ever happened. I mean, to be able to read a book that it hadn't worked for me. I have tried. The truth of the matter is, it hadn't worked for me. And I also have followed like people like Seth Godin and all those where they read about, I think they said they read about 300 books a year, right? And so in one of the questions he said, like, the way he reads the book is he basically read the book until he understands the underlying concept or the principle of the book. After that, the rest of it is just his, the author's way of justifying or building the case for that principle or the concept, right? For me, I have this, maybe it is a psychological thing where I sometimes have this pressure on myself. I want to read the book into it. Like, I have understood the book like in the second or the third chapter, and like after that, I still feel like I still want to finish the book. I feel it's incomplete, and it's a bit of a psychological thing. I think it's probably a bad idea. But this answer your question about speed reading and all that, I don't know whether it will work for me, because for me, I really want to understand the concepts behind some of these books I read, and so also I don't read fictional anymore like as much. So I'm yeah. If it works for you, it works for you. It didn't work for me, and I think I'm too old to pick it up anyway now.
Yeah, you don't speed read, but you actually listen to audiobooks on 2x, so that is a kind of a speed reading there.
Yeah.
I'm very curious to know if our other attendees here are speed reading, or do any of our attendees use any memory techniques? Let us know in the comments if you are. That'd be very interesting to find out how many of our attendees are actually using speed reading. For me personally, I have not found it to work for me. Maybe I'm not doing it well, but I actually like to take my time with my books.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of fakeness in it also, to be very honest with you. Personally, it's like this, right? It didn't work for you, it didn't work for me. It's our fault. Maybe the technique doesn't work. There's no way for us to know. I am yet to come across people who say, oh, it really works. You can read books like that, and they can refer to like the 42nd page, third paragraph. I don't know. I don't believe in that so much. I don't think it's really that possible. Maybe you can read fast. But one thing I know, one of my lecturers in university told me, is that when you have practice for reading, the number of words you capture in your eye span increases. Like today, if I'm taking 3 words per session, per time when I'm reading, she said she can go up to about 10 words, or 7 words in one time. Maybe that's the way that you do it. It hadn't worked for me, Krishna, sorry.
Maybe it has worked for somebody here on our conversation. Let us know if it worked for you, anybody who's joining us on the call. All right, we do have a few more questions coming in, Rohan, and there's somebody here who actually knows you as one of his best CIM lecturers. So,
wow.
So he would like to ask you, how would you make your students read marketing-related books?
First of all, that's a paid commercial. I paid that guy to say that I'm a best lecturer. Right, Raghu, I apologize, man. What to do, right? No, I think, I don't think you should force people to do it, right? I don't think, today, the way that you can consume, like, I have now such a big consumer of podcasts, right? And I listen to a lot of stuff on YouTube. Like, I will work on my email and I'll have YouTube playing in the a video of a particular speech from someone or whatever listening for. So I think we need to I think for me, the biggest thing that really helps with books is the fact that I'm a firm believer that, reading this rearranges the brain cells in a way that helps you to, structure your thoughts, structure your brain, structure your nerve systems in a better way. I'm a firm believer. I don't have scientific facts. There could be an article about it here and there, but the point is, I believe that. And I also believe that if you could wake up in the morning and read books before you start the day, your brain kind of structures itself better. That's my belief. So as a result, I'll always try to do this. And if I go on a holiday, I always carry it. I'll try to read it and all that. But we also have like so much of work we need to now fit into our world. And as a result, you may not always find time to do this. And as a result, sometimes you consume, today I consume books on, as I said, podcasts, and audio and whatever. You try to fit into your lifestyle as much as possible. That's what I actually do. Yeah. And about the CIM student thing, right?
Marketing related books.
uh, the toughest part in anywhere is to read books which are textbooks. And I will tell you that even for me, reading a textbook is such a bore. It's like I'm reading this
from a lecturer, yeah.
yeah, I mean that's the truth, right? And it's almost like I have to force myself to read. Like I'm reading this textbook, which is about 300 pages, that Advanced Analytics for Business. It's a huge textbook type of a thing, recommended reading. Oh, it's tough. It's tough, but I mean, sometimes you got to do it. As I said, for the kids, why I don't really ask them to read the marketing related books isn't so much because I don't tell them, not that I don't want them to read. I just think that they have to find a mechanism that works for them. Maybe audiobooks is the way to go for sure.
All right. We do have another question coming in. Somebody here would like to know, what do you think about Robin Sharma's work? Do you read Robin Sharma?
No.
Oh, you don't?
Okay. Krishma, you and I had this conversation. This is where it goes a little bit off the plan conversation about me trying to be nice. And listen, I think certain things I try to look at the world the way it is as much as possible, and with its misery, with its happiness, with its joy. And I think there are some of the stuff are very philosophical, and I find it hard to relate to some of those concepts. Like, I think for me, I never try to read things like The Secret. I think the book Secret, right? I mean, and then Robin Sharma, and then we also have this guy. What's his this very famous guru who has this amazing set of books.
Sadhguru.
Who goes around does the
Sadhguru.
No, the US guy. The US guy. I forget his name.
Tony Robbins.
Tony Robbins, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think the ultimately what you have to realize is that most of these are also like there is a little bit of commercial incentive behind this as well. I think just because it had worked for someone, if it works for you, I'm not here to judge. I'm not going to say don't read it. I don't believe in it, so I don't read those stuff. Right? I don't read Robin Sharma's and all that. I think those are very philosophical. That's the same thing I told about autobiographies. Some of the autobiographies, it doesn't excite me because the reason is that my lifestyle, my current day world I see is so different. I will read Elon Musk. I will read some of the books like Peter Thiel. I will read Gary Vaynerchuk. By the way, Gary Vaynerchuk, Jab, Right Hook. I'm sure Dilip will also talk about it next week. Gary Vaynerchuk. Some of these books I want to read. Sonny Bill Williams' autobiography, by the way, it just got launched last week, and I was fascinated to. He's one of the sportsmen. I'd love to read autobiographies from sportsmen who are contemporaries today, right? So those are the things I think really excite me. Some of the other stuff are philosophically makes you feel really good about it, but I don't know whether you can really apply it to your current day life. For me, it doesn't excite me.
So self-help and philosophy is not your preferred genre. You prefer things like technology, business.
Not really. No. Let's say that.
We do have somebody here who's asking us, in an MBA class, you said that you were addicted to meditation. So tell us more about that.
Medication?
Do you meditate?
No, I never said that. Who said that? People, a couple of my friends have been telling me about, oh, you really should try yoga and all that. I think there's a space for me over a period of time for that. I'm not there yet. Obviously, I'm a huge advocate of health and fitness and stuff like that. I think people should do it. I started very recently, and as a result, I think it's something that everybody should pay attention to. So I really think there's a benefit on it. I think if you have a bit of a workout in the morning, that energy flows through the entire day, and that's amazing. People know it really works. I think as you grow older, you want to focus on your mobility and other stuff. But listen, meditation, I have not got there yet. uh, maybe I will. I'm not that spiritual. I think that self-help and meditation doesn't work for me. Yeah, sorry if I miscommunicated to you in the MBA class. That was not my intention.
All right. Well, somebody else here would like to know if you read anything related to quantum physics, especially things like quantum entanglement and things like that.
Yeah, I've been over the last, maybe this is what happens when you are in a lockdown. You try to find stuff. As I said, I don't try to restrict and say I want to read about this. I try to pick different things. So I've been very fascinated about. Actually, the fascination started with Einstein's kind of a lifestyle and some of the things that he spoke about. The fact that we found this Higgs boson about a few years ago in the CERN. And as a result, like, things he professed and he kind of mathematically proved 100 years ago. Now we are finding the actual proof of it. And then that led me to discover, because the problem we have is that we have two kind of theories. One is the Einstein space-time and different type of a couple of theories, special relativity theory and relativity theory. And then to describe the smaller elements of the world, we have the quantum mechanics. We can't connect these two, and they find, okay, I think I'm boring you. The point I'm saying is, yes, I'm really interested in the quantum mechanics these days, and I've been reading about it. I'm also interested, very weirdly, finding the planet 9.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm a huge advocate. I think Pluto is now downgraded. It's not a planet. I absolutely within my belief, I have absolute belief within next 10 years we will find a planet in the most, almost the similar size as Neptune outside. So yeah, it's fascinating stuff, but nothing to do with books though.
All right. So technology and quantum physics, those are things that interest you and fascinate you. Well, somebody here would like to know if you have any podcast sites that you would recommend to consume some good material.
Yeah, I think there are a couple actually I can actually recommend. If you're interested in more of the current day stuff, I've been following Chamit Palihapitiya. I don't know how many of you know him. He's one of those guys who really caught my attention over the last maybe 4 or 5 years, and I've been following him. And he takes part in this incredible podcast called All in One. It's on YouTube. I think it's also at Spotify as well. So I listen to that podcast a lot. And also there is, I just subscribed to this particular, hold on, let me just tell you the name. I might forget it. The particular couple of more than podcasts, like especially on YouTube, few channels that I really follow. Let me just see whether I could find it in a hurry. Okay, I don't get it in my head right now, but a few places I probably can maybe connect you guys. There's the really good places I found is CNBC has this tremendous like 20-minute kind of a series that is out there that talks about, like, for example, electric vehicles and robotics and all those different things about how does Amazon make money, how does all these different topics, which are really, really fascinating. The one particular thing I've been following, just give me 1 second, let me just dig that up. I apologize for it, Trish. This is what happens when you're in okay. Barclay Haas Alumni Network.
Yes.
Barclay Haas Alumni Network. I think I subscribed. There's some very interesting stuff there. Yeah, these are the stuff that keeps me busy these days, so I can recommend you to go and check it out as well. Yeah.
All right. So those are, well, we already spoke about autobiographies, but there is somebody who's still asking, if you have any autobiographies that you would like to recommend.
Sorry, would you mind repeating the question? I didn't hear you.
Yes, autobiographies.
Yeah.
Do you have any that you would recommend apart from the one by Andre Agassi?
No. Sorry.
Short answer.
No.
Okay.
Listen, I as I said, I mean, it's a very easy to recommend things like Steve Jobs. For me, as I said, it didn't work for me because I have anyway been a follower of his life from the time he gave this, like the God's second coming kind of a thing in 2003 and launched iPhone and Macs in 2003 and 2007 iPhone. And I've been following his life a lot. So as a result, I found that book to be really difficult to read. But I'll tell you one book I haven't got and I'm trying to read. It's the same author. There's this very famous guy, Isaac, who wrote Steve Jobs' autobiography. He released autobiography about a lady who is doing some work in STEM. Um, especially around the genes and few things. And I think I would really love to read that autobiography. I haven't got it in my hand yet. I will definitely be reading Sonny Bill Williams' book as well. Those are the two books, if you ask me, as autobiographies, I will read now. But is there anything that I've read I can recommend? No, nothing. Yeah. One thing about, even why I loved Andre Agassi's book Open is the fact that it demonstrates the competitive nature of today's world, where if you want your son or your daughter to succeed by 18, 20 in a sport or anything, the decision isn't really the child's. The decision is the parents. The parent has to invest the time and the money and the effort to get the child prepared if they want their child to perform at that world class, Olympic, whatever level. Because by the time the child decides for themselves, it's already too late for them. That is a common thing, because Andre Agassi's father drove him, telling the mother that I'm taking my son to the school, didn't take him to school, took him to the tennis court and forced him to play. So he talks about, while he became so good in tennis, how much he hated playing it, but he also says that I didn't know any other thing to do because all my life, this is all I knew. So he kind of talks about that side of tennis as well. I think it's a very fascinating story. I think it can relate to today's, some of these, tennis players having a lot of mental issues as well.
Well, what about your family, Rohan? Are you the only one reading, or do you have other family members who are also involved if they haven't?
I think my wife reads a lot more than I do. Obviously, because it's part of, I think she has a bit of an advantage because it's part of her job as well, because she's in academics, right? However, my sons are quite young, so I kind of asked them to read a lot. My son started reading Diary of a Wimpy Kid, the series.
Yes.
Right. So my elder one loves it and he started reading it. We try to get him as many books as possible. My younger one hasn't really found anything yet. He's more of the creative one, I think. So as I said, I'm not trying to force them. I don't think reading should be forced down on anyone and told people. I think people should discover it and enjoy it. I always say that sometimes we put so much of pressure on ourselves and make it a task. The moment you make it a task, you start, the one you enjoy, you start hating. And I think the idea is not to make it a task.
Well, Dominika Vimalaratna has a question for you. He's asking if there are any books that you have read which have been converted to movies. And Rohan, we're talking about this. We're talking about this.
Listen, I personally think I have yet to, I don't know whether I can name and say these books are converted to movies or whatever, right? But having said that, I will tell you whatever. All the books that I've converted to movies, I think vast majority of the people will say have done absolute rubbish with the movie, right? Because I think the reason, I think we discussed this, Trishma, I think the reason why it is so is that a book is a very personal experience. When we start getting lost in these pages, our imagination, the way we, even the author might describe a scenario, the way that each of us will decode in our heads are so unique and so different. And what a movie maker will do is a version of that. It might be right for someone, but it may not be right for you. And as a result, I think there's a huge challenge of meeting the expectations a lot. I'm yet to come across anyone who said, okay, this particular movie did justice to the book. I think the only movies which are better than books are Twilight. Sorry, I'm being petty here now. Right? So yeah, I think every other movie is bad than the book I have come across. I'm just asking myself whether there's anything that I have.
Asking if now you've read the Da Vinci Code and whether you saw.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That particular one, I read the book, I think, before watching the movie.
Okay.
I think it's a very interesting topic, but of course, and then you can say that angels and demons and everything I read before. before the movies came out. Even the Inferno, which was his, I think, last book. I think the books are better. I mean, it's always better. I don't know. I will go on a limb and say that books will always be better than movies for sure. For me.
Okay. Here we have another question asking, how will you motivate a non-reader to read books?
Okay.
What do you have to say to everybody who's not reading currently?
Okay. Can I answer one? I saw a question. Can I just answer that and come to your question?
Sure.
So first of all, I just reminded me, 2 books I enjoyed in my teenage years were the Sherlock Holmes books. I was fascinated. I got the Sherlock Holmes, the big one, which has a lot of short stories in it, and another book which has like four stories about him, right? I still have it in this thing. I bought it. I don't read it, but it's a collection thing for me. The reason why I love that book is, again, a lot of this, obviously Sherlock Holmes itself is awesome. The English in that book, during my era where I was trying to get better at English, the way that they speak and all the little bit older English, and it was so fascinating to hear the way they speak. Like, would you brought your chair here and favor me with some details? I mean, the way some of the terms they use is so different rather than say, tell me what just happened, right? So I'm a huge fan. I started reading Lord of the Rings, couldn't get through, didn't like it. Started reading Harry Potter, didn't like it. I've never read Harry Potter, so I know that people are going to hate me right now for this, but hey, it's what it is, right? Then answering your question, what was the question? Would you mind repeating that, Trish?
Yes. How can you motivate a non-reader to read books?
I think personally, the way for me is that it's always an evolution. You need to start somewhere. Don't force, as I said, don't feel the pressure that just because we are talking about all these titles and all that. For me, one of the things I started, for me, was one of the bigger drivers was looking at Tintin and Asterix and stuff like that. To be able to say, my imagination started coming from seeing those books which are more visually driven than even the words. Then came the Hardy Boys, and yes, I read Famous Five, but I didn't really understand them as much, and I didn't enjoy it as much. But then, when you go through that kind of phase of evolution, and then you start reading about Hardy Boys, and which are simpler books, which are more adventurous, I think it's really important. I think the key is that finding something that you are curious about, that you want to kind of dig a little bit deeper, right? So I think that way is a very good way. And if you can find that books and start reading that, and don't let anyone tell, kind of ridicule you. Like, I've read Daniel Steele. I've read all of Daniel Steele's. I mean, it's the same story in various ways in Daniel Steele, right? They fall in love, they get married, they have kids, they get divorced, they find love. I mean, that's the story. I mean, that's it in Daniel Steele, right? But essentially, the point I'm saying is that, if you think, don't ever say that I want to be a fiction. I mean, don't go in all these unnecessary classifications about what type of books you read and how it is. Find something that you're curious about, finding a couple of books about it. But one of the things about book selection I do is that I'm a little bit selective about reviews. And as I said, I try to read books which are closer to this year. I don't try to go back and read the books that have been written in 1990s, in 80s and 70s, unless it's a classic, like whatever. So that's the way I would advise you. Pick a book for something that you're curious about. It could be technology, it could be mystery, it could be murder, it could be anything. That's a fascinating way to evolve your thinking and mind.
We just have about let's say about 6-7 minutes before we wind up, so I'll just probably take 2 questions. We do have 2 questions here. Ramon is asking us, if you read a book at a time and you finish it, or do you read multiple books at once?
I read multiple books at a time. Okay. I'm as I said, right now I'm doing this textbook here. I'm reading this for when I want to find a little bit of inspiration and a little bit of a time to think about it. When I'm making a presentation and all that, I download a book about that particular topic and I listen to it on the way and coming back. So it's, for me, it's to preparation work. So I handle multiple things. I think that's a way to do it. Yeah, I think the short answer is you can read multiple books. And I think the other thing is that I never tried it, but I think people have suggested that you don't have to start the book from the beginning and end at the end. like especially when you're reading not the fictional book, but non-fiction book. I mean, if you find a chapter that you're really interested, you can flip to that, read that chapter, and maybe that's it. You want to read for a while after that. And that's fine. I think these are little bit mental blocks that we have put in our head, saying that, oh, I have to start from forward all the way to chapter 1 and then go to the. I think you don't need to have structure on it. As long as you pick up a book and read about 5 to 10 pages every day, I think that's fascinating. I don't do it, but I think that's a really good way to do it. Yeah.
Another question we have here is, if you can name a few management books which must be read by senior level management in an organization.
Oh God. I don't. So I apologize. I don't have anything top of the mind that I can tell you right now. I'm reading this particular book by, it's a little bit harder to find this particular book, but it's a modern book. I think it came out last year by an author called Mike Walsh. He has a book called The Algorithmic Leader. I think it's about preparing organizations with the upcoming, I mean, you understand the thematic, right? I'm in this space, so I'm kind of more tilted and I'm more bending towards those things. It's about how do you find productivity in a world of automation? How do you work with algorithms? How do you find, type of thing? I think it's a great book to prepare leaders for the organizations from either getting disrupted or becoming redundant or irrelevant. So for me, I think that's a great book to read. I also don't try to recommend leadership, because leadership is a very personal thing and a very individual thing. And everybody is different, right? So yeah, I mean, I think some people might find inspiration from Mahatma Gandhi. Some people might find inspiration from Gary Vaynerchuk, very opposite type of personality, so to speak. But with what works for you.
Fantastic. Well, we just have a few more minutes left. Perhaps I'll just take this one question. If a youngster wants to become a successful entrepreneur, how is reading going to help them? That's the question.
Okay. We have few minutes, and I don't think we can cover this question in there. I'm available on any of the social media points. Please reach out to me and ask me this question. I'm happy to give you an answer. The only thing I can tell you is the two things I can tell you is that first, you have to solve a big enough problem for a big enough audience. What I mean by a big enough problem is, are people finding it big enough, problematic enough that they are willing to pay money to get it solved? Big enough audience is that, does that problem exist for thousands of people? Number one. Number two is that you don't necessarily have to have a poetic, earth-shattering, kind of an idea. It could be something that you can do better than someone else doing. And okay, one other thing is that if you're a young person, don't feel the pressure you want to be an entrepreneur now. I mean, there's no rule saying you have to be an entrepreneur at 20s. You can be an entrepreneur at 30s, and you can be an entrepreneur at 40s. Average age of some of the great entrepreneurs have been late 30s and late 40s. So maturity, network, skill set, structure, discipline, these matter for entrepreneur. You don't have to be at 20s and talking about entrepreneurship as well. So yeah, reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you separately on that.
All right, we're almost running out of time. I know Ramon has asked us another question about whether you take notes when you read books, but you've already answered that. So we will talk about that right now. But in closing, Rohan, if there's anything you'd like to share with everybody about the power and the impact of reading that it has had on your life, what would you like to say in closing? Any thoughts?
I mean, I've mentioned this to you. I mean, today I have this habit of going to airports early, because I want to spend the time in the bookstores there in airport, because airports have been the best place to find. And I've spent hours looking for books, and I bought 6-7 books outside, because before the Kindle and everything, that's the only way to get some of the latest books in for you to read. I think for me, this is a lifelong habit, and I'm glad that I picked it up. And I have when I was preparing only, I just remembered even Kulasena Fonseca and all those authors that are just like very nostalgic for me, right? And I realized that there's a huge history and a roadmap leading up to this point while I'm talking about augmented now, right? So I think pick it up, start the habit, don't feel the pressure, enjoy it, but just try to get like a couple of pages in every day and make it a habit. As I said, read books that are curious. Don't go. Oh my God, Trish, are you all right?
I am okay. I am online, but we just had electricity outage here So
This is
no
what,
problem. The show goes
Raghu,
on.
I told you this,
Yes.
man. Raghu, I
would like
told you
to
this.
close. All right, I'm
Raghu,
here, Rohan. Don't worry.
No, I was going to say, Raghu, I told you this is what happens when you interview people like me.
All right, but we do have Raghulan here. So as we wrap up, perhaps I'd like to ask Raghulan if he'd like to share a few things with us.
Now, before Raghu, let me just finish my train of thought. So
Sure.
what I'm saying is that don't feel the pressure that someone recommend this, world-class, classic, legendary author and the book series, that you have to read it and you have to enjoy it. I mean, that's a common mistake. As I said, I'm very upfront that I haven't read Harry Potter. I never want to read Harry Potter because I don't think I'm going to enjoy it. Like Lord of the Rings, people look at me like, oh, how can you be a book reader? I mean, don't get into that pressure. If you like something, just read that, and that's really, really okay. Go where where your curiosity leads you, and that is the key to finding great things about looking up. Raghu, over to you, man. Atrish is back.
Yes, Raghu, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, thank you, Rohan. It was an awesome inspiration. I guess 1 hour of inspiration, so many books. I just wanted to say thank you. I think 5 years back at a BNA event, you proposed this book as a recommendation, The Charisma Myth. Hope you remember that. I think after the event, I actually sent a message asking. I just actually forgot the name of it, and you referred me. I think 5 years. This book I'm rereading always. It has fantastic techniques. Thanks for that. I think fantastic and inspirational thoughts, Rohan. I think the last book you referred was this one, right? Code Breaker.
Code Break. Okay, yeah. Listen, I'm going to leave one book that really inspired me. I just remembered now. Atomic Habits.
All right.
Right. I'm going to leave that with everyone who's here and also for Raghu. Atomic Habits. It's actually a life-changing kind of a book for me. I've just finished reading it here. Last maybe 10-20 pages. That's why I didn't talk about it. It's about forming habits that really shape you and make you better. Sorry, Raghu, go ahead. Thanks, man. I don't remember, but I'm so glad that you remember.
Yeah. Thank you, Rohan. It was awesome. And I think we discussed, you discussed and you spoke about close to around 20 plus books in this within an hour's time. That's awesome inspiration, Rohan. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Over to you,
Krishna. Thank you, Raghulan. Rohan, we're almost coming to the end of our time here together, but on behalf of all of us here at Pick a Book, we'd like to say a big thank you for sharing your time, your insights, all of your reading material that you recommend. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. I'm sure everybody agrees that it's been a fun conversation, something quite different from what we're used to, because you've been so open about your outlook of the world. So thank you for that. With that, ladies and gentlemen, as we say, thank you to Rohan Jayaweera for joining us in this segment of Pick Books Why I Read. I hope that this has provided all of you with immense opportunity to be inspired to pick another book, to encourage you to pursue knowledge for your personal and professional growth as well. So with that, we are wrapping up this segment. Thank you once again, Rohan, for joining us. Thank you to all the ladies and gentlemen joining us via Zoom and Facebook. And with that, we wish you a pleasant week ahead. Happy reading, and we'll see you at another segment of Why I Read. See you later, ladies and gentlemen.
Bye, guys. Thanks a lot for having me. Pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks, Rohan.
Okay, bye, guys.